Returned to France, August 1916. So even though he's been suffering from shell shock, he's sent back to fight.
It was generally expected that you would recover, and so it was considered to be very important to treat men as quickly as possible and to return as quickly as possible.
So, returned to France, August 1916, came back July 1917, went to CD. Where's CD?
That's the command depot, so clearly he's going somewhere to be assessed. It's sounding very much like he's really not coping one way or the other.
So, psychological condition, manner calm and unemotional, talked quite freely about the voices of men talking to him and persecuting him for the past 6 months. So it means he's hearing these voices in his head.
Yes, he's hearing voices in his head. He's feeling persecuted by these voices. Clearly that's very, very disturbing.
So 30th of November 1918, hallucinations of hearing very persistent, talks to himself in Park Corner. It's a really tragic image, isn't it? Him just being left alone to mutter to himself.
That sounds really sad. He comes across as very lonely.
I mean, a few years earlier, you're a labourer, and now you're talking to yourself in a park corner because you've been in these terrible, terrible battles.
It must have been disturbing for him, must have been
For the
disturbing
family as
for an
well.
entire...
And he's got 3 young children.
And, of course, there's this real concern. They don't know if he's going to get better.
And so what treatment would he have got in this time?
At Napsbury, it was relatively progressive. In modern terms, we would talk about occupational therapy. Men could have worked in the workshops, in the garden, on the farm. But if they didn't want to take part in any of those activities, they were pretty much left to their own devices. So, you know, you could say there's a sort of benign neglect going on.
And then if we go on to July 1919, it just says home for discharge.
He's home because he's deemed either able to cope or because it's deemed that his family can cope with him.
So do you know what happened to John next?
Well, the next record I have is this one from 1939.
So 20 years later.
Yeah.
And I see the stamp, Cane Hill Hospital.
This was the local lunatic asylum.
And it was called a lunatic asylum.
Yes.
I can see down here, Borman, John G. It's very sad, isn't it?
The lunatic asylum is really not the home fit for heroes that the government promised these men.
I was pretty sure that John had suffered from shell shock, but it seems that he was in a really bad way mentally. It's not just what we might consider now to being depressed or something. It's really strong mental illness. And of course, he's gone through hell in the First World War, in these terrible battles, and the things he's seen, he can't unsee. So he left the battlefield, but he'd taken it here. It just never left his mind.
To find out why his great-grandfather ended up at Cane Hill Hospital 20 years after he left Napsbury, David's come to Coulsdon in Surrey, to the site of Cane Hill, known at the time as the local lunatic asylum.
Well, I've come to Cane Hill, but there's not much left of it now. It's a building site, which is obviously my natural environment. Nice to meet some builders.
David's meeting historian Alice Brumby.
Hello, Alice.
Hello, David. Welcome to Cane Hill Hospital.
Thank you very much, or what is left of it.
I've got a photograph if you'd like to see what it used to look like.
Okay.
So you can see this block here is the block that you're currently standing in front of. So this would have been the reception building.
Right, okay.
So your great-grandfather would have come in through that building.
Okay.
And the roof here, we can quite clearly see the chapel. And the chapel we can see, again...
That's pretty intact, actually, isn't it?
It's even more intact inside if you want to come and have a look inside.
Please. So do you know how long my great-grandfather John was here at Cane Hill?
So this is from the admission register.
October the 21st, 1919, Borman, John George. I didn't think he was here until 1939. And this is only 3 months after he left Napsbury. So really, he must have been home for a short amount of time and then came here. And if you look along, certified. So he'd been certified insane.
He had, so it's likely that when he went back to his wife, your great-grandmother, presumably it was too much for him, and perhaps his illness meant that your great-grandmother couldn't look after him.
What an awful decision to have to make, to have to send the father of your children, your husband, to a lunatic asylum.
Well, there's another document here.
John George Borman died 28th of the 9th, 1962. So he was here for 43 years.
It's a long time to be in one institution.
It's a lifetime.
It is a lifetime. But that suggests that for 40 years, his wife, your great-grandmother, had to live life without her husband.
And those children, I mean, you're never going to know your dad in a way that most of us do.
Having literally never known him.
I'm amazed my granny had such a sunny disposition, because she had to grow up without a father, and in adult life her father was in a lunatic asylum. And that must have been a really difficult thing to live with.
She probably would have had to be very careful who she spoke to about it, because of the huge stigma that was involved at the time regarding mental health.
So we've all seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Would it have been like that, or?
It's unlikely in a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest scenario that it would have been punitive, and they certainly weren't meant to punish, but every aspect of his life would have been regimented. Breakfast would have been at this time, he would have eaten this food, he would have gone out to work, he'd have come in for tea, lights out would have happened. So it strikes me that your great-granddad went from being a hero in the First World War into a military hospital, following that into a lunatic asylum, and during his time here, lost.
Yeah, just, I guess, became another inmate.
You can see here that they tried to make life a little bit more fun for them.
General weekly programme of entertainments. Quiz, talk in clubroom, elocution class, cinema, radio listening, art class. Well, I know my great-grandfather did like to paint, because I've actually got these 4 beautiful little postcards he painted that my grandmother gave to me. She obviously really treasured them, and they're actually really rather good.
Well, I've seen some of his artwork, because I've got some more here to show you.
So these came from?
These came from your Aunt Vivian.
Good old Aunt Vivian. Pretty, aren't they? Very delicate.
They suggest a tranquility to me, these paintings, these watercolours. They don't suggest a man who's terrified or scared.
They don't reflect that at all, actually, do they? They're rather pretty.
I think they're very peaceful, and I hope that's the experience that he had here.
Yeah, me too. It's such a sad story. I look at this picture of him at the beginning of the First World War, and he looks proud, he's smiling. He has no idea what horror he's about to face. You know, he was somebody, he was a father, he was a husband, and he just becomes lost. He sacrificed his mental health for his country, and the reward was spending the rest of his life here. There is one positive part of this story, which I think is the paintings, because the paintings make me think that his life here couldn't have been terrible, because he had a creative outlet, he had something he cared about. And in my own life, look, I've gone through nothing like him, but times when I felt down, I felt grateful to be creative, because it's an escape. I'm glad he had the paintings, and I'm glad I've got them. I'm glad they're still in the family, and hopefully they'll stay in the family forever.